And we've got to get number 10 and your time, the PM's time, away from how it's been managed for the last 20 years, which is media entertainment service. And his response was, no. That's crazy. Everyone will go crazy with us if we do that. We've got to make friends with the media. We drove them all mad last year. Now it's time for us to, a great reconciliation. And I said, well, we could do that, but if we do that, we'll just be the same as every other government for the last 20 years, which is chasing the bullshit in the media all day. And 4 years will pass and we won't actually have done anything.
Yeah.
And by then it'll be 14 years of Conservative government. We've just won an election partly by running against the previous decade of the Conservative Party. We can't pull that off again. We're actually going to have to do a whole bunch of things. And also that's why the people are here, right? We actually want to solve these problems. Those issues get to the heart, I think, of a lot of it. You have a managerial question about how you actually manage priorities in such an insane environment. Yeah. You have a personnel problem about a lack of talent. But you also have this fundamental question of, do the key politicians want to spend their time on the important problems, or do they want to spend their time running around all day dealing with the media? And the answer is almost all of them want to do the second.
There's a lot I want to ask about there. It's interesting because the way you're describing it, it sounds like it's a company with the prime minister as a CEO who's dealing with all these operational things that come up, but there is no CEO who has like a long-term plan. I'm curious about the media stuff. I want to understand why it's the case that they're so obsessed with the media. Does the media actually matter that much to how people perceive the politicians? How is the media interacting with the things that are happening in the building so that people are constantly thinking of the media? Why is the media so ever present in people's minds here?
So just going back to your first point about the kind of CEO analogy, imagine if Steve Jobs or Tim Cook or Patrick Collison or someone actually spent a large part of their day just doing photo ops as well. Like that's actually the reality about how a lot of these jobs have evolved. So you have a person whose time is the single most precious asset, who, because of the dysfunctional bureaucracy, his decisions or her decisions is the only thing that can actually break down the bureaucratic resistance and make sure that something happens. Yet they're actually standing with, the ambassador from Tonga Zonga, whatever country, just doing photo ops for a large part of the day, or going to stupid ceremonies or whatever it might be. So again, I think that analogy also shows some of the central problems. These people have all grown up in a system where they just don't know any better than dealing with the media all day. Yeah. Now, if you actually understand communication, you know that communication is not the same as answering questions to the media, but that's not what they think, and it's not the environment in which they operate, and also it's not the incentives in which they work. Again, one of the funny conversations I had with Boris was I said, we should say to the ministers that here's your actual priorities as defined by us. Whether or not you get promoted and whether or not your career goes well is going to be defined by how well your department actually fulfills these goals. Not, we don't care about all of your interviews. We don't care if you are on TV or never on TV. That's not how we're going to judge, because they've all grown up in a culture where they think whether or not they're going to be promoted really depends on, are they seen as a good media performer or do they botch things on the media? Well, that's just a fundamentally bad criteria, not least because their definitions of what's good on the media are themselves terrible, right? By approaching government like that, you're incentivizing them to think that their goal is making friends with the media. So then they get good interviews. That also incentivizes them to leak everything. So again, the culture and the incentives are self-reinforcing in a very negative way.
What would happen if you said, okay, no more interviews? Let's just say the prime minister was somebody who agreed with you and said, no more interviews, ministers, you're going to do your thing, media is out. How would the media react, and would that matter?
So we sort of did that in Q1 2020. We actually stopped participating in the #1 insider elite media show on BBC Radio. We just said we think the show is rubbish and it's a waste of everyone's time, and no ministers are going to be going on it anymore. Yeah. The media went completely crazy. One of the most senior people in the BBC said to me that I was a fascist, and a lot of the MPs went crazy as well, because for them, being on that show is their raison d'etre.
Right.
So it was extremely unpleasant and disruptive for both the old media and the MPs who've grown up in that culture.
How much does it have to do with the fact that in the British political system, the people who are running these departments have to be an MP, so they have to be an elected official? Is that why they're so obsessed with the media? Because it's like if a congressman had to become the Secretary of State always.
So I think so. That's part of it. Though I would pick up on your language, which I think is important, right? Because you say the people who are actually running the departments, of course, they're not running the departments.
So
right?
who is?
So they describe themselves as my department. I'm running the department. The media describes them as they're running the department. Yeah. But how many people can the Secretary of State for Defense fire? 3. 3 people.
He legally cannot fire?
He legally cannot fire anybody else in the building.
So who can fire?
So his personal 3 people that he brings in, that he's allowed by the system, he can get rid of those 3 people. The other hundreds of thousands of people in the system, he can't get rid of a single one of them. So the person who actually is in charge of personnel at the Ministry of Defense is the permanent secretary. Stress on the word permanent, right? The only person in the British state who has the legal and constitutional ability to say, this senior person in the Ministry of Defense or Department of Education or whatever is clearly failing and they must be removed, and I order that they are removed, is the Prime Minister. That itself is problematic because the large part system will say, well, we can't just dismiss them, or if we do dismiss them, then there'll be legal, but you can actually remove them from the post. There are complications, and those complications have grown in the last few years because of the way that the legal system and various parts of the law have evolved. But the PM can actually remove someone, but only the PM can. So that gives you an idea as well of the tremendous bottlenecks that occur inside number 10. So I'll tell you a story about that that kind of summarizes it, right? In COVID, at the peak of COVID craziness in March 2020, a whole bunch of people come in fact, actually on the day itself that the PM tested positive for COVID, a bunch of people come into number 10, sitting around the table, and they say, we have a meeting and it's about supplies of PPE to the NHS. Well, none of this PPE that we've ordered is going to be here until the summer. Okay, but like the peak demand is over the next 3 to 4 weeks. Well, sorry, Dominic, but that's just, it's not going to be here. Why not? Well, because that's how long it takes to ship from China. Why are you shipping from China? Well, because that's what we always do. We ship it from China. But A, we need it now. And B, all of the airlines are like grounded. No one's flying anything. So call up the airlines, tell them that we're taking their planes. We're flying all the planes to China. We're picking up all our shit. We're bringing it back here. Do that now. Do that today. Send the planes today. Yeah. We did that, but only the Prime Minister could actually cut through all the bureaucracy and say, ignore these EU rules on blah, ignore Treasury guidance on blah, ignore this, ignore that. I am personally saying do this, and I will accept full legal responsibility for everything, right? So you multiply that kind of problem by hundreds and thousands of problems, you get a sense of partly why COVID was so crazy. This is normal government, right? But in a crisis, when no part of the system can actually move fast, all of these bottlenecks end up very dramatically escalating to the PM's office. And if you read Jared Kushner's book, memoir about the White House, very, very similar tales there, that a lot of things that obviously should have been solved elsewhere couldn't be solved at any other part of the system. They all end up kind of cascading upwards in these centralized bureaucracies, because ultimately only the president or only the prime minister can give certain kind of orders.